The polished mahogany of the table felt like a vast, unforgiving ocean between Liam and his wife. On its surface, the candlelight danced across gleaming silverware and crystal glasses, creating an illusion of warmth that did not exist. This was L'Etoile d'Or, the city's most exclusive restaurant, a temple of gastronomy where whispers were currency and a reservation was a mark of status. It was supposed to be a celebration, their 10th anniversary. Instead, it had become a tribunal. Liam sat perfectly still, his posture an island of calm in the churning sea of condescension. To his right, his wife Isabella was performing. Her laughter was a little too loud, her gestures a little too broad. She was holding court for her father, Marcus Thorne, a man built from market shares and dismissive glances, and their guest, Julian Vance, a real estate developer whose suit was as loud as his opinions. "Honestly, Liam, it's just quaint," Isabella said, waving a dismissive hand. The diamond on her finger, a gift from a time when she still looked at him with admiration, caught the light and threw a shard of brilliance into his eye. "He spends his days designing these perfectly adequate little houses for perfectly adequate little families. It's a stable life, like a sturdy, sensible shoe." Julian Vance chuckled, a greasy sound that slid across the table. "Nothing wrong with a sensible shoe, I suppose, as long as you're not trying to win a race." He leaned forward, his cologne an aggressive assault. "In my world, we don't do sensible. We do spectacular. We build monuments." Marcus Thorne, who had been observing his son-in-law with the detached curiosity of a biologist studying a mundane specimen, nodded slowly. "Ambition is the engine of progress, Julian. Some men have it, some men find a comfortable parking spot." The insult, couched in the language of paternal wisdom, was his specialty. Liam said nothing. His left hand rested on the worn leather of the portfolio case, propped against his chair. The leather was soft and supple from years of use, the corners rubbed smooth. It was a simple, unadorned thing, a stark contrast to the opulence surrounding them. Inside it lay 5 years of his life. Inside it lay the truth. He felt the familiar weight of it, a silent anchor in the storm. Isabella, emboldened by the silent approval of her father and the smirking admiration of Julian, decided to land the killing blow. She placed her hand on Liam's, a gesture that looked like affection but felt like possession. Her touch was cold. "I just worry, she said, her voice dripping with insincere concern for the benefit of her audience. "We had so many dreams, but somewhere along the way the dreams got smaller. The world is moving so fast, and we're just standing still." She looked at him, her eyes holding not a hint of the woman he had married, only a chillingly honest disappointment. 10 years, and all we have to show for it is a sensible life in a sensible house. I look at a man like Julian, at what you're building, Dad, and I wonder, is this all there is for us? The question hung in the air, brutal and final. It was the culmination of 1,000 small cuts, 1,000 moments of quiet disdain. They thought he was merely a disappointment, a man of limited vision and modest means who had somehow lucked into a table at their favorite restaurant. They saw him as the sturdy, sensible shoe, good for walking but not for flying. They didn't know that in his quiet, unassuming portfolio, he held the blueprints to the sky itself. Within the next hour, in this very room, the foundation of their arrogant world would not just crack, it would be demolished. But before we witness the demolition, let's take a moment. If you're finding yourself invested in Liam's story, and you believe that true worth isn't always what's on the surface, go ahead and hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the conclusion of stories like this one. We love knowing where our stories are reaching, so drop a comment and let us know what city or country you're watching from. It's amazing to see how far these narratives travel. Now, let us return to the beginning of that fateful anniversary. The day had begun not with a bang, but with a familiar, oppressive silence. The morning light, soft and gray, filtered into their minimalist bedroom, a space Isabella had designed with the help of a decorator who specialized in aspirational tranquility. It had always felt more like a showroom to Liam, a place where life was meant to be art-directed rather than lived. He had woken early, as he always did, his mind already turning over the complex geometries of his latest project. He had watched Isabella sleep for a moment, her face serene, and felt a pang of the old love, a ghost limb of an emotion he could remember, but no longer fully feel. He had placed his gift on her bedside table. It was a small, simply wrapped package. Inside was a first edition of The Master and Margarita, a book she had loved in college, one they had read aloud to each other during the first year of their marriage. It was a nod to the people they used to be, a quiet plea to remember. When she finally woke, she glanced at it, her fingers tracing the edge of the wrapping paper. "Oh, that's sweet, Liam," she'd said, her attention already snagged by the glowing screen of her phone. She scrolled through social media feeds, her thumb moving with practiced speed. The gift remained unopened. "Did you see Chloe's post from Monaco? It looks divine. We should go." "Happy anniversary, Izzy," he said softly. She looked up, a flicker of something, guilt perhaps, in her eyes. "Happy anniversary, honey. 10 years, can you believe it?" She finally picked up the gift and opened it, her reaction polite but distant. "Oh, the old book. How thoughtful." She placed it on the nightstand, where it would gather dust next to a stack of glossy magazines. Her phone buzzed again. "It's Dad," she announced, her tone instantly brighter. "He's just confirming dinner tonight. He's bringing a business associate, Julian Vance. He's the one doing that massive Phoenix Towers development downtown. Dad says he's a real dynamo." Liam felt a familiar tightening in his chest. "He's bringing a guest? To our anniversary dinner?" "Don't be like that, Liam," she chided, already halfway out of bed. "It's a huge networking opportunity. Dad's just looking out for us. For you. He's worried your career has plateaued." Plateaued. It was her father's word, but it had become her favorite weapon. She wielded it with surgical precision, dissecting his life, his choices, his very character. He had long ago stopped defending himself. He had learned that her critiques were not invitations to a discussion, they were verdicts. He had chosen l'étoile d'or with deliberate intent. When he told her where they were going, her eyes had widened in genuine surprise. "L'étoile? How on earth did you get a reservation? I tried last month for my birthday and they were booked for 6 months. And Liam, can we afford it?" The question was not one of genuine financial concern. Their finances were fine, comfortable by any normal standard. It was a test of status. Can you, my sensible, adequate husband, truly operate in this world, the world where my father and his friends live? "I took care of it," was all he had said. He let her believe it was a stroke of luck, a last-minute cancellation. He allowed her to construct her own narrative, one in which he had stumbled into a world he didn't belong in. It was a crucial part of his plan. He needed her to be at her most confident, her most condescending. He needed her to believe, without a shadow of a doubt, that she held all the power. Now, sitting at the table, the first course, a delicate mosaic of scallops and citrus foam, was served. Marcus waved away the sommelier and gestured for the waiter to fill his own glass, a subtle power play to establish dominance over the staff. He then fixed his gaze on Liam. "So, Liam," Marcus began, his voice oozing faux interest. "Isabella tells me you're keeping busy. Still designing those charming little tract homes for the suburbanites, are we?" Liam carefully placed his napkin in his lap. He met his father-in-law's gaze without flinching. "I've moved on from that, Marcus. I'm working on something more significant now." Isabella let out a short, sharp laugh, a sound like breaking glass. "Significant? Liam, darling, adding a 2-car garage is not a significant architectural statement." Julian joined her in her laughter, and the two of them shared a look of mutual understanding, a silent pact against the lesser man at the table. Liam felt a familiar, cold anger rise within him, but he pushed it down, compressing it into a diamond-hard point of focus. He remembered the countless dinners, the family gatherings, the holidays, each one an opportunity for them to remind him of his perceived place. He recalled the evening, 5 years ago, after a particularly brutal dinner party where Marcus had openly pitied Isabella for marrying a dreamer instead of a doer. Liam had overheard Isabella on the phone with her mother later that night. "I just wish I'd married a man with more drive," she had whispered, her voice thick with resentment. That whisper had been the architect of his new life. It was the moment he stopped trying to win her approval and started building a world she couldn't comprehend. A world that was about to manifest right before her eyes. The conversation had now shifted to Julian's pet project. "The Phoenix Towers is more than a building," Julian pontificated, gesturing with his fork. "It's a statement. It's going to redefine the city's skyline. We're talking 2 million square feet of prime residential and commercial space. A monument to ambition." "A monument to your ego, you mean," Liam thought, but his face remained a placid mask. Marcus was practically glowing. "And the financing is all locked up. The only piece of the puzzle left is the design. Julian, you mentioned the architect was being kept under wraps?" Julian leaned back, preening. "That's the developer's call. He's a bit of an eccentric, but he's smart. He hired some unknown, apparently. Probably some kid fresh out of school they can pay in peanuts and push around. You know how it is. Keeps the budget lean and the creatives in their place." "Exactly," Marcus agreed, taking a large gulp of his wine. "That's the smart way to do it. You can't let the talent get control of the vision." Liam felt a slow, cold smile threaten to form on his lips. He suppressed it, instead taking a deliberate sip of his water. He glanced at the portfolio resting beside him. The weight of it was no longer just an anchor. It was the comforting heft of a perfectly balanced weapon, waiting to be used. The talent, he thought, was about to take full control. The conversation about the restaurant was a predictable turn. Marcus, a man who measured his importance by the exclusivity of his experiences, couldn't resist commenting on their surroundings. He gestured expansively at the dining room, a symphony of muted golds, rich velvets, and subtle lighting that made everyone look like a movie star. "You know, I had to call in 3 favors with a city councilman just to get a lunch meeting here last month," Marcus announced, ensuring the entire table understood the level at which he operated. He then turned his full, condescending attention to Liam. "I'm still baffled as to how you managed this, Liam. A last-minute cancellation, was it? You must have an angel watching over you." The question was designed to reinforce Liam's status as an outsider, a tourist in their world. Isabella watched him, a slight, smug smile on her face, waiting for him to stammer out some story about dumb luck. Liam placed his fork down gently beside his plate. He looked directly at his father-in-law, his expression open and unreadable. "It wasn't a cancellation," he said, his voice even and clear. "I know the owner." The statement landed in the middle of the table with a soft thud. For a moment, there was only the faint clinking of distant cutlery. Julian raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Marcus looked suspicious. It was Isabella who broke the silence, her laughter sharp and dismissive. "You know the owner?" she scoffed, turning to Julian as if sharing a private joke. "Oh, that's priceless. Liam, what does he do, moonlight as a clerk at the hardware store? Please don't be ridiculous." She didn't wait for an answer, instead launching into a well-rehearsed anecdote for Julian's benefit. "You have to understand Liam. He has all these quaint little connections. The guy who runs the local bookstore, the woman at the farmer's market who sells him tomatoes. It's part of his small-town charm, even though we live in the middle of the city." Every word was a carefully polished stone, thrown with the intent to build a wall between him and them, to define him as simple, provincial, and utterly out of his depth. Liam didn't react. He let the story wash over him. He had heard variations of it 100 times. His quiet friendships, his preference for genuine connection over strategic networking, were always presented as evidence of his lack of ambition, his failure to grasp the mechanics of power. His hand tightened on the worn leather of his portfolio. The narrator in his mind, the one that had kept him sane these past few years, spoke with calm authority. Patience. Let them build the cage. They don't realize you hold the key. He could feel the dense sheaf of papers inside, the crisp edges of the vellum, the faint, clean smell of ink. It was more than just plans and contracts. It was his declaration of independence, written in the language of steel and glass. Julian, sensing the conversation had drifted from his favorite topic, himself, deftly steered it back. Well, connections are everything, he conceded, then pivoted. But at the end of the day, it's about scale. The Phoenix Towers, the lead developer, Mr. Chen, is a legend, a recluse, but a titan. He doesn't deal with bookstore owners. He deals with visionaries. When he called me, it wasn't a social chat. It was a summons. Marcus nodded sagely. That's how the real world works. It's a closed circle. You're either in it or you're on the outside looking in. He gave Liam a look that was almost pitying. And it's very, very difficult to get in. Very difficult, Liam repeated softly, almost to himself. He ran a thumb over the brass latch on his portfolio. The metal was cool and solid beneath his touch. He thought about Mr. Chen, a man he'd shared tea with just last week, a quiet, brilliant man who valued integrity over bravado. He thought about their shared vision for the Phoenix Towers, a project born not of ego, but of a desire to create something beautiful and lasting. Isabella, meanwhile, was completely captivated by Julian. She hung on his every word, her eyes bright with an admiration she hadn't shown Liam in years. She saw in Julian the embodiment of the life she craved, a life of obvious, unapologetic success, a life of monuments, not sensible houses. The dramatic irony was so thick Liam could almost taste it, richer than the wine in his glass. They were all so busy explaining the rules of a game they thought he wasn't even playing, unaware that he had already won. The main course arrived, a perfectly seared filet mignon resting on a bed of truffle-infused puree. The scent was intoxicating, but Liam felt no appetite. The air, already thick with unspoken resentments, grew heavy with an impending sense of finality. This was it. The quiet before the storm. Isabella, now fully emboldened by the twin pillars of her father's wealth and Julian's flashy success, decided it was time to move from veiled insults to open declarations. She put down her knife and fork, her movements deliberate, theatrical. Marcus, she began, addressing her father, but intending the words for Liam. I've been telling Liam for years. We're falling behind. All our friends, Chloe and David, the Martins, they all have second homes. They travel 6 weeks out of the year. Their children are in the right private schools. We're just stuck, treading water. She then turned her gaze, cold and direct, upon her husband. The pretense of a celebratory dinner was gone, stripped away to reveal the raw, ugly truth of her discontent. I can't do it anymore, Liam, she said, her voice dropping to a low, intense whisper that was more powerful than any shout. I can't pretend to be happy with adequate. I need more. I deserve more. It was a declaration of war, delivered on the battlefield of their 10th anniversary. The words were not just an expression of desire, but an indictment of his entire being. He was not enough. What he provided was not enough. Their life together was not enough. Liam did not respond immediately. He picked up his glass of water, the crystal cool against his fingers, and took a slow, measured sip. His eyes scanned the restaurant, absorbing the details with a preternatural calm. The low, confident murmur of the other diners, the almost silent ballet of the waitstaff moving between tables. The way the light from the central chandelier, a cascading waterfall of hand-blown glass, reflected in Isabella's merciless eyes. This was the moment he had been rehearsing in his mind for months. Yet he felt no anger, only a profound, clarifying sadness. It was the quiet, hollow feeling of a building being prepared for demolition. The moment after all the sentiment has been stripped away and only the structure remains. His internal monologue was not a torrent of rage, but a calm, analytical assessment. He saw the arc of their relationship laid out before him like one of his own blueprints. The early sketches full of light and shared dreams, drawn in the cheap apartments and late-night diners of their youth. They had agreed then so fiercely that money and status were traps, prisons for the soul. They were going to build a life based on love, on art, on meaning. Then came the revisions, the subtle pressures from her family, the comparisons to her friends, the slow, corrosive drip of materialism that had eroded the foundation of their shared values. The woman sitting across from him now was a stranger, the final, unrecognizable draft of a project he no longer had any part in. The sadness was for that loss, for the girl who loved first edition books and believed in a life less ordinary. But beneath the sadness was a bedrock of resolve. He had not failed. He had honored their original vision. She was the one who had abandoned the project. He finally set his glass down, the soft clink, a period at the end of his internal reflection. He met her gaze, and his own was clear, steady, and devoid of the weakness she expected to see. His voice, when he spoke, was quiet, but it cut through the tension like a surgeon's scalpel. "Is that what this is, Isabella?" he asked. "Our 10th anniversary dinner? A performance review?" The directness of the question caught her off guard. For a split second, a flicker of uncertainty crossed her face. She had expected him to shrink, to apologize, to promise to do better. She had not expected him to name the ugliness of the situation so plainly. But her father was there, and Julian was there, and her pride, that massive, fragile edifice, reasserted itself. She straightened her shoulders, her expression hardening once more. "If you want to call it that, then yes," she said, her voice regaining its cold edge. "Perhaps it's long overdue. For the past several years, your performance has been adequate, satisfactory, but it has not been exceptional. And I am tired, Liam. I am so tired of living an adequate life." Marcus, ever the patriarch, decided it was time to step in and manage the situation. He placed a hand on Isabella's arm, a gesture of calming authority, and then turned to Liam with a look of profound disappointment, as if dealing with a difficult but well-meaning child. "Son," he began, the word a deliberate assertion of a familial power Liam had never accepted. "What Isabella is trying to say, perhaps a bit clumsily, is that we're concerned. We see so much potential in you, but it seems capped. You're a good man, Liam. No one is denying that. But you're not a provider in the way a woman like my daughter needs, in the way she deserves." The word hung in the air, provider. It was a term from another era, a word that measured a man's worth in dollars and square footage. Liam turned his calm, unblinking gaze from his wife to his father-in-law. The verbal chess match he had been preparing for had just begun. "A provider," Liam repeated, letting the word settle. "I see. And what precisely does Isabella need that I haven't provided? We have a beautiful home. We eat well. We have no debt. I have provided a life of comfort and security. So please, Marcus, enlighten me. What is the definition of provider that I am failing to meet?" His question was not angry. It was analytical. It was a request for data, and it threw Marcus off his rhythm. He expected emotion, defense, anger. He did not expect a calm, logical cross-examination. "It's not about just paying the bills, Liam," Marcus sputtered, waving his hand dismissively. "It's about a certain lifestyle, a level of influence, access. It's about giving her a world, not just a house." Before Liam could respond, Julian Vance, who had been watching the exchange with the smug amusement of a spectator at a gladiatorial match, decided to jump into the ring. He likely felt his position as the table's alpha male was being subtly undermined by Liam's unnerving composure. He leaned forward, a conspiratorial smirk on his face. "Come on, mate," he said, his tone dripping with condescension. "Let's be real. It's obvious what he means. Look at this place." He gestured around the opulent dining room. "This is a special occasion for you, a one-off. For people like us," he gestured to himself and Marcus, an invisible velvet rope separating them from Liam. "This is a Tuesday. That's the difference. It's about the level you play on." Liam finally, slowly, turned his full attention to Julian. He regarded him for a long moment, his eyes taking in the expensive watch, the perfect teeth, the profound, unshakable confidence of a man who had never been truly tested. "People like you," Liam said, his voice quiet, almost conversational. "Tell me, Julian, what kind of people are those, exactly?" The question was a gentle probe, but it carried the sharp tip of an accusation. Julian, however, was too arrogant to feel it. He puffed out his chest, ready to lecture the simple man on the ways of the world. He was about to explain the rules of the club, utterly oblivious to the fact that Liam was not just a member, he was the man who had designed the clubhouse. Just as Julian opened his mouth to deliver his pontification on power and influence, a figure emerged from the subtle shadows of the dining room and approached their table. He was a man in his late 50s, tall and impeccably dressed in a tailored suit that whispered of European craftsmanship. His silver hair was swept back, and his face, though lined with the stresses of running a world-class establishment, held an air of innate authority and grace. It was Antoine Dubois, the owner and soul of L'Étoile d'Or. Instantly, the dynamic at the table shifted. Marcus and Julian, who just moments before were the arbiters of status, straightened up, their expressions changing to ones of eager deference. To be acknowledged by Antoine Dubois in his own dining room was a significant social coup. "Monsieur Dubois," Marcus said, his voice suddenly smooth as silk. "A magnificent evening, as always. Your staff is impeccable." "Julian Vance," Julian added, extending a hand that Antoine briefly, coolly, shook. "A pleasure. We must talk about hosting our project launch party here." Antoine offered them a polite, professional nod, his eyes betraying nothing. "Monsieur Thorne, Mr. Vance, a pleasure to have you with us." His gaze swept past them, a brief, dismissive transit. Then his eyes landed on Liam. The change was instantaneous and startling. The cool professionalism vanished, replaced by a look of genuine warmth, respect, and even a hint of friendly deference. The air of the proprietor was gone, replaced by that of a colleague greeting an equal. "Liam," Antoine said, his voice infused with a personal warmth that had been entirely absent before. "I am so sorry to interrupt your dinner. I just wanted to come over personally to ensure everything is to your satisfaction." He paused, then added, "And to let you know the final contracts from the Singapore group have arrived. They are in my office for your signature whenever you are ready." A profound, echoing silence descended upon the table. It was as if a soundproof barrier had dropped around them. Isabella stared, her mouth slightly agape, a look of utter, uncomprehending confusion on her face. Marcus's jaw had gone slack, his businessman's brain struggling to process this impossible new data. Julian simply looked from Antoine to Liam and back again, his confident smirk frozen into a mask of disbelief. It was Isabella who found her voice first, forcing a brittle, nervous laugh. "Contracts?" she said, looking at Antoine but speaking to the table. "Liam, what is he talking about? Did you offer to fix his plumbing while you were making the reservation?" The insult was reflexive, a desperate attempt to force the world back into its familiar shape, a world where Liam was the handyman and she was the lady of the manor. Antoine Dubois' warm smile did not falter, but it tightened at the edges. A subtle, dangerous chill entered his eyes. He looked from Isabella's confused, mocking face to Liam's calm, patient one. In that brief glance, a silent question was asked, and with a slight, almost imperceptible nod, Liam gave his answer. Permission granted. Antoine turned his body fully, directing his attention to Isabella. His voice when he spoke was no longer warm. It was cool, precise, and utterly formal, the voice of a man revoking a privilege. Madame, he said, and the way he uttered the word made it sound like an accusation. Your husband is not my plumber. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. He is my partner. He made a subtle gesture that encompassed the entire, breathtaking dining room, the soaring ceilings, the custom chandeliers, the bespoke furniture. Liam Sterling is the lead architect and a primary investor in the complete redesign and international expansion of the L'Etoile brand. This room, this very design you are sitting in, it is his vision. We are merely the fortunate stewards of his genius. The bomb had not just landed, it had vaporized the entire landscape of their evening. Isabella looked as if she had been physically struck. The color drained from her face, leaving behind a pale mask of shock. Her reality, so carefully constructed around the central pillar of her husband's inadequacy, had just been obliterated. Marcus Thorne, a man who prided himself on reading every room, every situation, was utterly lost. His eyes, wide with disbelief, darted from the impossibly distinguished Antoine to his quiet, unassuming son-in-law. Julian Vance looked like a man who had just discovered the unknown kid he planned to push around was in fact the king of the entire country. Liam, the eye of this sudden hurricane, remained perfectly calm. With a slow, deliberate movement, he reached down and placed the worn leather portfolio on the table. The simple, unadorned object now seemed to possess an almost gravitational pull. He unfastened the cool brass latch. The click was the only sound in the crushing silence. He slid out a thick, beautifully bound set of documents. On the cover, in elegant, minimalist font, was the title, L'Etoile d'Or, a global hospitality vision. Lead architect, Liam Sterling, Sterling Architectural Group. He didn't push it towards them, he simply left it there, a testament in black and white. Then he slowly turned his head and fixed his gaze on Julian Vance. You were talking about the Phoenix Towers project, Liam said, his voice still quiet, yet it carried the immense weight of a judge delivering a verdict. You mentioned the developer, Mr. Chen, was smart to hire some unknown architect he could push around to keep the budget lean. Liam reached back into the portfolio and retrieved a single, folded document. He slid it across the polished mahogany. It glided silently over the surface and came to a stop directly in front of Julian's trembling hands. It was a letter of intent, signed in a bold, confident script by the legendary developer himself. The developer, Mr. Chen, is a dear friend and a mentor, Liam stated, his voice devoid of any triumph, filled only with a quiet, unassailable authority. He didn't hire an unknown. He hired the only architectural firm he trusted to deliver a city-defining landmark, my firm. He tapped a single finger on the document next to his own signature. Sterling Architectural Group, which I founded 5 years ago, is the sole design partner for the Phoenix Towers. The unknown you were referring to is me. I've always found that anonymity keeps conversations honest. The reversal was absolute. The power dynamics of the table had not just shifted, they had been inverted with breathtaking speed and finality. The man they had spent the evening pitying and belittling was, by an order of magnitude, the most powerful, wealthy, and influential person in the room. Isabella finally found her voice, but it was a choked, strangled whisper, the sound of her entire world crumbling. Your firm? What firm? You work for Davies and Finch. It's a small company. For the first time that evening, a flicker of Liam's long-buried pain was allowed to surface. It wasn't anger, it was a deep, profound sorrow. He looked at his wife, truly looked at her, and saw a complete stranger. "I left Davies and Finch 5 years ago, Isabella," he said, and the quiet words carried the force of a confession and an accusation. "I left the day after I heard you on the phone with your mother, the day after you said you wished you'd married a man with more drive. I decided that night that you were right. I decided to build something." He gestured to the documents on the table. "I built all of this. I just didn't feel the need to announce it. I thought my actions, our steadily improving life, the fact that we have wanted for nothing, would speak for themselves. I thought you, of all people, would notice. I see now that I was wrong. You weren't watching me. You were too busy watching everyone else." The silence that followed was not just an absence of sound. It was a living entity, heavy and suffocating. It was filled with the ghosts of 1,000 dismissive words, 100 condescending glances, and one devastating, life-altering phone call. Antoine Dubois, his part in the drama, played to perfection, gave Liam a subtle, respectful nod, and melted back into the shadows of his restaurant, leaving the family to sit in the wreckage he had helped expose. Marcus Thorne was the first to reboot. His mind, a finely tuned calculator of profit and loss, power and position, whirred into action. He was no longer looking at a disappointing son-in-law. He was looking at a strategic asset, a power player he had catastrophically misjudged. The humiliation was instantly transmuted into a frantic, desperate attempt to realign himself with the new center of power. "Liam, son," he began, his voice a thick, syrupy blend of shock and newfound admiration. My God, I had no idea. This is incredible. Truly, you've been playing your cards close to your chest. A brilliant, brilliant move." He chuckled, a hollow, metallic sound. "I respect that. God, do I respect that." He was trying to frame Liam's secrecy not as a result of their cruelty, but as a cunning business strategy he, as a fellow Titan, could appreciate. He was trying to get on the team. Isabella was still in freefall. Her entire sense of self, which was so deeply intertwined with her perceived social standing relative to her husband, had been shattered. The man she had spent years molding into a symbol of her own disappointment was, in fact, the very embodiment of the success she so desperately craved. The irony was a poison coursing through her veins. She looked at Liam, at his calm, sorrowful face, and for the first time in a very long time, raw, primal fear entered her eyes. The fear of having made an unforgivable, life-destroying mistake. "Liam," she whispered, her voice trembling, pleading, "Why? Why didn't you tell me?" This was the moment. The question she should never have had to ask. This was where Liam, without raising his voice, without a single ounce of cruelty, would finally present his list of grievances. He did not look at Marcus or Julian. He looked only at his wife. "Tell you?" he asked, his voice a quiet storm of sorrow and righteousness. "When, Isabella? When was the right moment? Was it last Christmas, when you were laughing with your friends about my little drawings? Was it at your father's birthday, when you apologized to him for me not being more dynamic?" His gaze was unwavering. "Should I have interrupted you 3 months ago, when you were complaining that my salary, which pays for our mortgage, our cars, and your shopping trips, was embarrassing compared to David Martin's bonus? Or perhaps I should have stopped you earlier this evening, when you invited another man to our 10th anniversary dinner, specifically to show me what a real success looks like." He finally broke eye contact with her and swept his gaze over the three of them, Isabella, Marcus, and the now silent, sweating Julian. "None of you saw me," he stated, and it was the simplest, most devastating truth. "You looked at me, but you didn't see me. You saw a caricature you had invented to make yourselves feel better, stronger, more important. This," he gestured again to the portfolio, the symbol of his hidden world, "this success, this money, it doesn't change who I am. I am the exact same man you collectively spent the last 2 hours humiliating. The only thing that has changed in the last 10 minutes is your perception of my net worth." He let that sink in, the moral mirror he had just held up to their faces, reflecting an image so ugly, so distorted by greed and arrogance, that they could barely stand to look at it. Julian Vance, the self-proclaimed titan, was utterly deflated. The grand Phoenix Towers project, the monument he had been using as his social battering ram all evening, was under the complete architectural control of the man he had just called mate with dripping condescension. He was a contractor, and he had just spent 2 hours insulting the architect-in-chief. His career in this city, so dependent on the favor of men like Mr. Chen and apparently Liam Sterling, flashed before his eyes. "Liam, Mr. Sterling, look, he stammered, trying to formulate an apology, a retraction, anything to stanch the bleeding. "Congratulations, that's incredible news." Liam didn't even grant him a glance. It was the most profound dismissal of all. He was, to Liam, utterly irrelevant. As if on cue, Antoine Dubois reappeared, his movements as fluid and precise as ever. He stopped beside Liam. "Liam, your car is waiting out front whenever you are ready," he said, his voice once again warm and personal. Then, he turned his gaze upon Marcus Thorne, and his expression became one of glacial formality. "And Monsieur Thorne," he said, his voice dropping a degree, "I'm afraid there has been a clerical error with your corporate account. Our booking system shows a significant outstanding balance from several events. Your account and all associated privileges have been suspended, pending a full review. Effective immediately." Marcus turned a shade of pale gray that matched the tablecloth. L'Étoile d'Or was not just a restaurant to him. It was his primary stage for business. To be barred from it was a social and professional death sentence. The consequences were beginning, swift and brutal. Liam pushed his chair back and stood up. The movement was slow, deliberate, the final act in a play he had written and directed. He looked down at his wife, and the last vestiges of his pain seemed to dissolve, leaving behind only a vast, empty sadness. "I chose this restaurant for our 10th anniversary, Isabella," he said, his voice resonating with the quiet tragedy of what could have been. "I chose it because this was the night I was going to tell you everything. I was going to lay this all at your feet." He tapped the portfolio. "All of it, not as a weapon, but as a gift, as a testament to what I believed we could still build together. I hoped that you would finally see me again." He paused, the weight of the unspoken filling the space between them. "But you couldn't even give me that. You couldn't give us one night. You had to bring them." His gaze flickered to Marcus and Julian. "You turned our anniversary into a tribunal. You cast yourself as the judge. You brought your father as the prosecutor, and you invited him." He gave a final, dismissive nod in Julian's direction. "To be Exhibit A, the model of the man you wished you had married." Isabella's carefully constructed composure finally shattered. Sobs racked her body, raw and ugly. "Liam, please," she cried, reaching a hand across the table. "I'm sorry. Oh God, I'm so sorry. I was wrong. I was so wrong. We can fix this. Please, we can fix this." Liam looked at her outstretched hand for a long moment, then met her tear-filled eyes. His own were dry. "Can we, Isabella?" he asked, the question genuine, philosophical. "The foundation is broken. You don't respect the man. You only respect the success he's achieved. And that respect is 5 years too late and $1 billion short." He turned away from the table, from his crying wife, his stunned father-in-law, and the ruined real estate developer. "I'll be staying at the hotel tonight," he said to the room at large. "We have a great deal to discuss, but not now, and not like this." Without another look back, Liam Sterling, the underestimated man, the quiet architect, walked out of the restaurant he had designed, leaving the three of them sitting in the opulent, silent ruin of their own arrogance. The weeks that followed were a study in contrasts. Liam moved into the penthouse suite of the Empyrean, a boutique hotel whose sleek, minimalist lines and breathtaking city views were a product of his own imagination. He found a strange peace in the solitude, surrounded by the physical manifestation of his secret life. He worked, his focus sharper than ever, overseeing the final details of the L'Etoile expansion in Singapore and refining the structural plans for the Phoenix Towers. The world he had built in the shadows was now his sanctuary. For Isabella, the weeks were a blur of frantic, desperate communication. The life she had known, the one she had so bitterly complained about, was suddenly revealed to be a gilded cage of her own making, and she was now on the outside of it. Her texts went from angry and confused, "How could you do this to me?" to pleading, "Please, Liam, we need to talk," to utterly broken, "I miss you. I was wrong about everything." She left long, rambling voicemails, her voice thick with tears, a chaotic mix of apologies, accusations, and promises to change. She showed up at the temporary downtown office of the Sterling Architectural Group, a bustling, creative space filled with brilliant young architects who looked at Liam with a reverence she had never seen before. She was stopped at the front desk by a polite but firm assistant. She was no longer Mrs. Sterling, wife of the founder. She was an unscheduled visitor. The humiliation was a fresh, bitter pill. Liam, guided by a sense of duty rather than desire, finally agreed to meet her. He chose a neutral location, a quiet corner of a public park, far from the prying eyes of the worlds they had both inhabited. When she arrived, she was almost unrecognizable. The armor of her expensive clothes and perfect makeup was gone. She looked small, tired, and stripped bare of the arrogance that had been her constant companion. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, her voice barely a whisper. They sat on a bench, a careful distance between them. She didn't make excuses. She didn't blame her father. She simply talked. She spoke of the insecurity that had fueled her obsession with status, the constant, unspoken pressure from her family to measure up, to have more, to be more. She admitted that her admiration for men like Julian Vance was a sickness, a symptom of having lost sight of what truly mattered. "I stopped seeing you, Liam," she admitted, tears rolling freely down her cheeks. "I only saw what we didn't have compared to other people. I was so focused on the life I thought I was supposed to want, I destroyed the life we actually had." It was the beginning of a real apology, born of painful self-reflection, not just a desperate plea to regain her position. Marcus Thorne also tried to secure a meeting, but his motives were transparently different. He didn't text or call Liam's personal number. He had his assistant contact Liam's assistant to schedule a strategic business lunch. He saw not a son-in-law he had wounded, but a business opportunity he was in danger of missing. He wanted in on the Phoenix Towers deal. He wanted to leverage his newfound familial connection. Liam's response was polite, professional, and utterly final. Through his assistant, he sent a short, formal message. "Mr. Sterling appreciates the offer, but feels that mixing business and family would be unwise at this juncture. He wishes Mr. Thorne the best in his future endeavors." The door was closed, locked, and the key was thrown away. Marcus Thorne, the great patriarch, had been excommunicated from the empire he never even knew existed. The consequences for the silent enabler were not dramatic or explosive, but quiet, absolute, and permanent. The resolution with Isabella was not the simple reunion of a romance novel. When she asked, her voice trembling with fragile hope, if they could try again, Liam was honest. He looked at her, this woman who was both a stranger and the keeper of a decade of his life, and he felt not anger, but a deep, quiet ache. "I don't know," he said, and the honesty was both kind and devastating. "The woman I see in front of me today, she is closer to the girl I married than the woman I had dinner with a few weeks ago. I see that. But trust, Izzy, trust is like a blueprint. Once it's torn, you can tape it back together, but it will never be as strong. The lines will never be as true. He didn't want to punish her. He wanted her to heal. I think, he said gently, you need to find out who you are without me and without your father. Find a job, pursue a passion, build something for yourself, something that has nothing to do with status or money. Discover your own worth, independent of anyone else's. He promised to support her financially to ensure she was secure, but he would not, could not, simply step back into their old life. Their future was an unwritten page, but the one thing he knew for certain was that it could not be a revision of their broken past. It was a hopeful ending, but a realistic one, grounded in the hard truth that some damage is too fundamental to simply be repaired. In the end, the story of Liam and Isabella became a quiet fable about the nature of worth. It serves as a powerful reminder that true value is not found in the gloss of appearances or the weight of a bank account. It is forged in the quiet moments, in the integrity of your character, and in the diligent, unseen work you do when no one is watching. Success is not the goal. It is the byproduct of becoming a person who deserves it long before it arrives. The respect that matters is the respect you have for yourself, a foundation that no amount of external validation can build, and no amount of external criticism can destroy. So, what do you think? What should Liam do in the long run? Can a relationship that has suffered such a fundamental breach of trust ever be truly healed? Or is starting over the only path to genuine happiness? We would love to read your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. Every situation is unique, and your perspective adds value to the conversation. If this story resonated with you, if you believe in the power of quiet strength and the ultimate triumph of integrity, please show your support by giving this video a like and subscribing to our channel for more stories of justice, redemption, and the complex dynamics of human relationships. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you in the next one.